On December 15, 2021, Editor-in-Chief of the Prospector, Alberto Silva, sat down to speak with Congresswoman Veronica Escobar. Escobar is on the ballot in the Democratic primary on March 1st, as she seeks to continue representing Texas' 16th Congressional District, based in El Paso.
Congresswoman Escobar, it's a pleasure to meet you again. It's a pleasure that you're joining us. Thank you so much for being here with us. It truly is an honor.
Oh, it's totally my pleasure, and you all have been so fantastic to work with. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you.
So much. Okay, you ready to jump in?
Ready.
Okay. Just to start off, Congress recently passed a $768 billion National Defense Authorization Act. What does this mean for Fort Bliss area? And what is your response to Democrats who want to lower military spending?
The NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, it's the biggest bill that is passed annually. It's considered one of those must-pass bills. Like, it's gotta pass every year. It's something that is critical to our national defense, and not just our military personnel depend on it, but our allies, our enemies, they all watch what we're doing in the NDAA annually. So there's obviously a significant amount of time and resources and effort and energy that goes into it. So the first part of your question, what does it mean for Fort Bliss? It means salary increases for our military personnel. It also means that with the work that I am doing and have done on diversifying our military leadership, it means ensuring that our Latino and African American military service members have a better pathway to leadership. It means also, with some of the reforms, really historic reforms around sexual assault, sexual harassment, that our vulnerable military service members, mostly women who are sexually harassed and sexually assaulted, that they have added protections. We've also put in place partnerships with UTEP, actually not put in place, but expanded and enhanced partnerships that the DoD has with UTEP, with our engineering department, with the brilliance that is here on this campus that I'm very proud of investing in. Climate. I am on the select committee for the climate crisis, and we've put in place provisions that will help our military installations address climate. There's so much, I really could go on and on. Another example of great work that we've done, so we've done climate, we've done military personnel, we've done increases in salaries. One of my amendments got adopted and survived the Senate, which is we cannot use our National Guard as basically guns for hire. We saw the South Dakota governor raise private money to send National Guard to the border in what was a horrible publicity stunt. That's no longer possible. That's outlawed through the NDAA. But we've also invested in modernization. We've invested in our national defense. We want a stronger, more lethal force, and that goes to your second question, which is the cost. It is the most expensive price tag for the taxpayer. And I will tell you, as a member of the Progressive Caucus, I absolutely agree with my progressive colleagues that we should be spending at least as much on domestic policy that we are spending through the Pentagon. It does seem incredibly unjust that we are spending the amount that we're spending on, what have been called forever wars, and on a footprint across the globe, and on lethal weaponry, but we're spending less than that on our own people, on educating kids, on healthcare, on addressing climate. Philosophically, I'm absolutely there with my progressive colleagues. My view, though, is I want to increase domestic spending. What we are doing right now through the NDAA in terms of our national defense, I think is really important. We are facing threats today really unlike what we have faced in the past. Cyber threats that we are facing from our enemies, we are dealing with China, with Iran, we are dealing with instability across the globe. More and more, we are having, I think, to reposition ourselves in the world, especially after the last 4 years where we alienated our allies and emboldened our enemies. There's a lot of work we have to do to ensure not just our national defense and our national security, but we have to regain our posture as a global leader. And that's why I feel very importantly that the NDAA that we passed this year, as much as I quibbled with the top line because it was more than what the president asked for, I was a supporter. We had great reforms, great investments, and important provisions in there that will help us advance what we need to advance.
Okay. Just to move on, talking about the NDAA, one of the things that I've talked to with military personnel is about the culture that is in the military. Mostly Army, because this is Fort Bliss and we have an Army base here. They have talked about multiple times about it's simply a part of the culture. And it's a sad thing to say. What are we doing about this culture that is embedded into the military?
With regard to kind of the pervasiveness of sexual assault, sexual harassment, I will tell you I have heard the very same thing from especially women. You know, I do have to say men have been sexually assaulted as well within the military, but as a percentage, women have, just in terms of the numbers, women make up the largest percentage of those sexually assaulted and sexually harassed in the military. Woman after woman, and from the men that I have heard from, they have said exactly what you've articulated, which is it's part of the culture. And I've had women tell me their stories and tell me things like, I have to be more careful inside the line, inside the wire, than outside the wire. Meaning when they are in theater, when they are away in dangerous places, I've had women tell me they have to be more careful among their peers than they have to be among the enemy. Can you believe that this is how members of our military feel? I have had service members tell me, I'm not even going to bother reporting sexual harassment because I see my peers who report sexual assault and not get justice. If they don't believe them when they've been sexually assaulted, why would they believe me that I've been sexually harassed? I have participated in listening sessions that have been really significant wake-up calls, and person after person tells me that the culture around this is rotted, basically. So there's a number of ways that many of us have talked about changing this. One of the ways that I have promoted is mentorship programs that are not just, basically a voluntary mentorship program where if you have a higher up who wants to be a mentor, and if you have, service members further down the chain who want to be mentees, then it'll happen. That doesn't work. We have to have legitimate and well-funded mentorship programs, which is something that is a priority for me, because what I have heard as success stories is women and men who feel like they have someone higher up in the chain of command who is on their side, someone who will listen to them, someone who will hear them out, give them advice, be an advocate, be there for them. It empowers them and it makes them feel a bit protected. But honestly, the other component of this is ensuring that we have a diverse leadership, that we have diversity at the highest levels, which is, for me, part of why we've got to make sure that the pipeline, the leadership pipeline, is robust, so that our leaders at the top look like the rest of America, so that we have as many women as a percentage at the top of leadership, as many Latinos, as many African Americans, as many Asian Americans, etc., so that the leadership at the very top is as diverse as our country is. And I do believe things will change when we are a more diverse organization. But in the meantime, as we build those robust leadership programs and those pipelines, we've got to have really aggressive training so that there is, number two, a zero tolerance. I think what we've done, part of the reforms that we've made, taking investigations outside the chain of command, will help with accountability, which I think is critically important. But those mentorship programs, there are so many women who I've talked to who've said, I don't know who to, I can't talk to anybody in my chain of command because I feel I will be retaliated against, or I feel fear. We've got to have those mentors who are there on base, outside of the chain of command, available in their corner, and it continues to be a priority for me. I want to see that across the board.
Thank you for that. Let's move on to the next question. You have done various work to ensure the asylum process is revised. Is there anything in the process to help immigrants who are already here, such as DACA recipients?
So a couple things. Yes, I am trying to reform the way that we process folks at the border. I've introduced, and actually let me back it up. I've brought over 20% of Congress to El Paso. I have walked them through the entire system, starting from Ciudad Juarez to what happens at our ports of entry, to what happens between ports, to what happens at our central processing center, to what happens at our ICE facility. I've given them the perspective of law enforcement, given them the perspective of the legal community and human rights advocate community. I've wanted my colleagues to see a full, a complete picture of what happens on the border, because I want them to be my allies when I try to reform it. So I've introduced the first of what will be at least two components of, I've introduced a bill that will have a companion that is part of a suite of reform bills that seek to reform the entire system. So the first bill that I introduced, and it actually passed last Congress, is a bill that reforms the Department of Homeland Security. It doesn't reform it in its entirety, but it makes it more transparent. It brings greater accountability. It brings community involvement. And I think it will create a better agency and a better community. The second piece of that is reforming the way we process asylum seekers. Right now, if you are seeking asylum, actually under normal circumstances, because right now most folks are being expelled, either through Title 42 and now through a program called MPP. But under normal circumstances, if you're an asylum seeker, you essentially are treated as a criminal. You are processed. You can be held in a processing facility for 10 hours, for 10 days, or as we saw under the Trump administration, for weeks and weeks, until you're transferred to another detention facility, an ICE detention facility. And so we have to make a decision as a country as to whether we're going to criminalize everybody who comes across. I reject that notion. It's not just inhumane, it's not just un-American, it's really expensive. So the bill that I've proposed completely re-envisions the way we process asylum seekers. It makes us safer, it gets Border Patrol agents back on the job, on the front lines, and it puts asylum seekers in a processing center that is meant to be sort of a wraparound, holistic center where they can get legal services, where they have access, if there's children, a lot of people in our care are kids. In our custody are children. There are child welfare services, adult welfare services, where USCIS is available in case there are other types of claims to be made. So it really addresses people who are non-criminals as human beings. Imagine that.
Let's move on to our next question. The U.S. Supreme Court is currently considering a case from the Tijuana tribe and the legality of gambling on tribal land. How would you like to see a Supreme Court ruling on this case?
There's 2 tribes in the United States of America who aren't allowed certain type of gaming. And both of those tribes are in Texas. One of them is in our community, the Tiguas. Every other tribe across the country is able to do more than the Tiguas are. So my bill, a bill that I have passed in the House, but that is always stopped in the Senate, is a bill that simply would give the Tiguas parity. It would make them, put them on the same level and let them, whatever you believe about gaming, it exists, and you shouldn't treat one tribe differently than you treat another. It's fundamentally unfair. So I hope that we are able to get my bill across the finish line this year. If not, and actually it won't be this year, early next year. And if so, it would be incredible. It would mean the Tiguas would be able to go back to the kind of economic development progress that they had before, where they could invest profits from their gaming into housing, scholarships, education, healthcare, economic development. I know my mom would be really happy. She could get back to speaking rock. But it would essentially create parity. And so we're keeping our fingers crossed that we're able to get that legislation across the finish line.
All right, let's move on. The Biden administration has announced that they will not extend student loan forgiveness. How do you want to see student loans being handled going forward?
I think we need to continue essentially the grace period that has existed during the pandemic for those who have borrowed student loans. But in addition to that, we know that there is an economic benefit. There's a real benefit to our economy to full student loan forgiveness. I have constituents in their 70s who are still paying for student loans. I have constituents, actually maybe the oldest constituent that I'm aware of is in their 60s, who are still paying for student loans. That I could have constituents in their 70s, but just one that I recently spoke to in his 60s who is still paying his student loan. I know that there are many other families impacted by the burden of student loans. We know our economy is changing as well, and that a lot of folks who invested in an education are not able to find the kind of high-paying jobs that they are looking for. So as we transition, I am absolutely in favor of canceling certain student debt. And I'm open to conversations about canceling all student debt, but I do believe that canceling student debt for those who cannot pay or those who meet a certain income threshold, we benefit from it. There are studies and there's research that demonstrates that you do that and it puts money back into the pockets of those who would then spend it on the local economy. So it would be great for El Paso. Will that happen? I think it's going to be a struggle. I think the White House is not there. But many of us continue to reach out and promote it.
Okay. So we wanted to ask about the West Texas Aerospace and Defense Manufacturing Correlation. So first, we just want to ask who is involved with that correlation? And then we also want to know, could you tell us more about the $500,000 award that was granted to you guys, that was just announced, I believe, yesterday? And what does that mean for this correlation? And for El Paso as a whole? So
when Dr. Chidori approached me about his vision, about keeping many of those engineers graduating from UTEP, I was 100% all in. And so we began our collaboration many years ago and said, all right, let's do this. Then when I ran for Congress, that was one of the reasons I wanted to be on the Armed Services Committee. There is an important link between the work at the UTEP engineering department in aerospace engineering and 3DI printing, additive manufacturing, the Department of Defense, which is under Armed Services, and Fort Bliss. So how do we take those great assets, right? How do we take these great engineers that are brilliant El Pasoans, many of whom may want to stay here? How do we leverage Fort Bliss, this incredible asset, and my position on Armed Services and my role within, as a member of Congress over the Department of Defense? And so we began working together, and I began pulling in money through the NDAA that would help fuel a lot of that collaboration. But what we're trying to do together now, the entire community, the city, the chamber, the county, my office, UTEP, is now we're all on the same page. Let's put this vision on steroids. Let's create a manufacturing base that leverages UTEP, that is focused on 3DI printing. When I've spoken to generals and folks in the Department of Defense, and I've said 3DI printing is our future and places like UTEP are our future, when you think about tanks out in theater, or when you think about people out at sea and parts breakdown, 3DI printing is the future. To be able to 3DI print your own parts for that tank, or for whatever is needed out at sea or in theater or at war. We just got to think about the opportunities that we have with our brilliance, our young people, our UTEP students, with Fort Bliss, with the Department of Defense. And so this grant from the EDA, this $500,000, which I hope, which basically opens the door and allows UTEP and this consortium to compete for even more money. So this consortium is now part of an elite few that's going to compete for more money. If we can get some big money, talk about putting this on steroids, we could grow our manufacturing industry in El Paso so that we're making more of what the Department of Defense needs. We're using more of our UTEP brain power, and hopefully we're teaching them to be entrepreneurial, open up their own businesses, become manufacturers themselves, use their engineering smarts to make money here at home. And this kind of ecosystem, this new avenue of economic development, it wouldn't just create jobs for engineers, but for all of the components of the supply chain, for the administrative back offices. It has enormous potential, and it could change the community for the better. I think it would give UTEP graduates an opportunity to stay home and make money here. I think it would create great avenues for small businesses and manufacturers, and it would increase the purchasing power of El Pasoans. I'm super excited about it.
Thank you so much, Veronica Escobar. Thank you so much for taking your time out of your day to meet with us and to talk so extensively about all these issues. We greatly, greatly appreciate it. The UTEP community appreciates it, and El Paso as a whole greatly appreciates it.
I am so grateful for the opportunity. I really enjoyed it. These are excellent questions, and I hope that maybe we can do this once a quarter.
I hope so too.
So that we can find time to visit. UTEP students, to me, represent the greatest hope I have for our community, for our future. And the more that I can sit and visit with you, the better. So thank you. Thank you so much for the time.
Thanks so much.